Hello, and welcome to another episode of Power Half Hour Unstoppable Business Owner. And before we get started and bringing our guest today, I just want to go over our sponsors for today's show. It's Jen Zahari with Strong Foundations, Coaching and Consulting. Definitely for all your coaching and consulting needs, you definitely want to get a hold of Jen at www.jenzahari.com. Or you can give her a call at 920-858-6653 and also book in your half hour session with her. I promise you will not regret it. As well, our second sponsor is Created No Way Out, also authored by Jen Zahari. You can get a copy of Created No Way Out on Amazon, or if you want an autographed copy, definitely go to her website, www.jenzahari.com. And it's an amazing story, of a woman that is thinking about taking her last day and goes through some different twists and turns. And it definitely has an ending that you don't want to miss. I actually have my autograph copy here. So, like I said, it's a great book. Definitely get your copy today. With that, I'm going to bring to the stage Mr. Joseph McGuire. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Dorothy, and thank you so much for the invitation.
My pleasure. This guy is completely amazing. But before I get into saying how amazing he is, Joseph, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, I primarily work with an ancient Chinese skill, a 3,000-year-old Chinese skill, which is literally reading people's faces. And people don't tend to realize just how much information is revealed by them doing and saying absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's funny because I've had some coaches say, you can read people by their body language and stuff like that. And then I've had some people say, well, take that out of context, and just hate people at face value. But when we first met, I was like completely blown away. Like, Joseph said some things that, I've heard, but I'm like, yeah. And then I was just like, you're right.
Mhm.
And he was right on the money. And so what got you into doing that kind of profession?
There was no master plan. That's the first thing. I was reading people as a small child. As far back as I can remember, I just picked up information about people. Men especially, like
Mm-hmm.
women don't tend to believe it, but men are straightforward, simple creatures. Women are a great mystery, but men are simple, straightforward creatures. But I instinctively knew stuff. Now, not really deep, intimate stuff, but I knew stuff about people's character and personality, and I just assumed everybody was doing it. And my father used to bring me to soccer matches when I was a kid. Like I can remember him carrying it like a wooden crate on his shoulder for me to stand on at the game, so I could actually see, and I could see the patterns of the game. I could see who was going to move where and who wasn't committed but pretending to be committed and stuff like that. And then many years later, when I moved to London, I was studying a branch of Oriental medicine, and I was introduced to face reading as one of the diagnostic tools. So that was immediately fascinating. But the more I delved into that, the more I learned that the Chinese perspective was that the mind and the body are one inseparable unit. So where initially I'd been taught to think of different areas of the face as relating to particular organs or body systems, the Chinese understanding was actually much deeper, and they related each organ to a particular aspects of our emotions and particular parts of our mental processes. And then again, as I delved further into it, I learned that we can see a lot of our parental and ancestral influences, both genetically and emotionally, on our face. And there were just so many light bulbs continually going off for me. So I was also working with one of my teachers in his health food store while I was living in London. And as soon as somebody would come in, he'd ask, okay, what's his condition? What's her condition? So it was like full on immersion. And I was just loving it, because people are just endlessly fascinating. And then I started practicing when I moved to Germany in 1985. And I've been teaching it since then. So there's always something to learn, and people's faces just reveal so much. And I just love studying people.
That is awesome. And it's funny you said that because I am the type of person in a crowded room. I like to be the one that sits back and just watches people,
Hmm.
and facial expressions, like you said, or how they interact with other people. And I remember, I think my husband and I were at a wedding, and I said, "What do you think that couple over there is talking about?" And he's just like, "I have no idea." And
Hmm.
when you started the show with saying men are very complex, and what you see is what you get, basically, and us women, like, we have 10,000 thoughts running per minute through our heads. So I totally get that. And I'm thinking my husband would have had an ulterior motive on something, but it's not. It's not so. They're just like, they don't think that far ahead.
Yeah, by and large, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's fascinating that a man actually said that on my show. I love it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just awesome. I totally love what you do, and I find it fascinating. And so once you talk to somebody, what is their initial reaction
Oh,
after you?
the reactions are varied, wide and varied. I mean, some people just get into it, and some obviously everybody wants to know about themselves. Um, but people, some people just love it, and they're just immediately fascinated. Because the reality is, like for most of our time, the time of our ancestors on this planet, whether we're like going back to being Neanderthals, Denisovians, or whatever, we haven't had language. It's only in the past something like 50,000 to 200,000 years we've had language. But
Mhm.
prior to that, we had to be able to, we survived and learned to collaborate by reading each other, reading the body language, the facial expressions, the facial features, all of that stuff. So this is actually hardwired into us, but most of us have forgotten it. So some people get it when I say it, and it's like, oh yeah, I actually knew some of that stuff already, but I didn't realize I knew it. And then other people are not so sure, and other people are, whoa, whoa. But in a business context, particularly before we had lockdown and all that, and thankfully we can meet in person again. But in a business context, what I would often do when I got a strange reaction from somebody, um, or a neutral reaction, I would ask them to take out the phone, show me a face on the phone, a photo on the phone of somebody they know well that I couldn't possibly know, and I'll tell
Right,
them about that person. And then they're either interested in a further conversation or they're not, but it saves time. So,
right.
good way to do it.
Man, I wish I would have had that pre-set up. I would have sent you a picture
Hmm.
with one of my ancestors. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would have been fun. Next time you're on the show, because I have a feeling you'll be
absolutely.
back.
Okay, good by
I
me.
just I found it very fascinating. Like, we were just talking, just networking, because that's what we do. And when you started seeing telling me what you saw, when you I think Rob, right? You and I had connected through Rob,
That's
and
right.
Rob
Yeah.
had featured me last Friday or the Friday before, and you saw my picture, and you're like, "Man, I got to meet this lady," and the crazy lady from Canada here, and so that's how it all started. And I just found it fascinating, on what you had to say, and um, you definitely told me I was determined, and that
Hmm.
nothing was going to stop me unless I stopped myself, basically, is what the gist of it was.
Yeah.
So I loved everything that you said about that. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I don't. I always say to people, I don't say nice things for the sake of it. I tell
Right,
you what I see, but the whole purpose, particularly when I'm meeting people on an individual basis, is to leave them feeling better about themselves for the experience, but
right,
not in a superficial way, connecting them with something they know deep inside about themselves and bringing it
right,
more to the surface.
right. And it's just so funny because when we had that connection, it was that day. It's like you were like the third person to just say exactly what came out, and I was just like, okay, obviously that's my sign, God. Like, seriously,
Hmm.
um, we could be stuck inside of ourselves and get to a point, and then you gotta push to get to the next level. But when you hear things like that, it's definitely, you're getting past your point there. So what three things, Joseph, would you say that you've had to overcome to get where you're at today?
Oh, wow. Okay, I grew up completely lacking in any confidence, completely devoid of confidence. Absolutely. And I was a really, really insecure, uptight teenager. Like I went around frowning because I was just so ill at ease with the world. And it, I'm about 5'11", and I was this height when I was about 14, and it served me well because I never got into any fights because people assumed I was tough, and I was actually terrified that if I had got into a fight, I would have just fallen apart.
Right.
But so I had to overcome the complete lack of confidence. That was the first thing. The idea of doing something like this would have terrified me, absolutely terrified me. So that was one primary thing. When I worked as a therapist for almost 30 years, but when I started to do business networking, I felt so completely out of place because I've met, like, my clients were business people, accountants, lawyers, what have you, but to meet them in their environment, that was really uncomfortable to think, because I thought of when I was a therapist, I thought of myself, that was my vocation. It wasn't my business, even though it was a business, obviously. But I didn't think of myself as a business person. So to see myself as a business person was, yeah, that was a whole other really uncomfortable process.
Right.
Um, and gosh, there's more than a few challenges in there, I suppose. Yeah,
Well, I'm glad
yeah,
that you gained the confidence so that you're here today because
me too.
your gift, you have a gift to give to the world, and
Thank you.
and I'm so happy that you got through that. And it's funny because I believe every person that's been on my show has said they had to get over themselves in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
So I mean, and that has been so true. um what people don't realize is yeah, it's great to be a business owner, but and it's great to have that freedom, to choose the schedule that we have, and or that we create the life that we want. But it's also a mind game, you
of
know
course it is.
and the one thing that we're constantly working on as business owners is our mind, our you know how should there's a word for it. I knew.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, your whole mindset, your whole outlook on life, and it's, people talk about work-life balance, but when you're running your own business, that's kind of a that's kind of elusive, because
Yeah.
you could be working, because there's so many aspects to it, and if you're running your business, you are your business, so
Yeah.
everything depends on you, and
Yeah.
there's no 9 to 5 around it.
Yeah, exactly. And or weekends, but I do find that I've had to put some kind of boundaries up to say, okay, you know definitely Sundays, if I have to work, it's like very limited, if ever. Like I try and stay out of my office on Sundays. It's just something that we have to do, because if we're
Yeah,
constantly working, we're gonna get sick, and then what?
yeah.
So, and so what three things do you help your clients overcome?
Okay. The, the primary thing, my primary focus is on helping people create exceptional relationships in their personal and their professional lives. So miscommunication, misunderstanding, and lack of confidence. They're the three. And the fact that technically we're speaking the same language doesn't mean we're actually speaking the same language. And that, I'm not just speaking about this conversation here, I'm talking in general terms. So often we see things, we generally tend to see things from our perspective and assume others do also see things from our perspective. So we often talk at people rather than talk to them, and it creates stress, frustration, anxiety. Particularly if that's done over a prolonged period, it creates misunderstanding. It creates lack of appreciation, and like we're seeing that in the business world now with the Great Resignation, where
Hmm.
so many people are leaving jobs, particularly younger people, because they don't feel appreciated, respected. listened to.
Mhm.
So I'm helping people to understand who it is they're communicating with,
Right.
so that they get the message across in the way the people or the person they're speaking to needs to hear it.
Right.
So that again, so it's building connection, it's building bridges rather than what so often does happen. And that happens in our personal lives and in our business lives. Of like when we had the longest lockdown in Europe, I'm in Dublin in Ireland here, and we had the longest lockdown in Europe. But one of the things that one of the areas of work that came to me organically, I wasn't looking for it, was people in lockdown with people they thought they knew and loved, and realizing, we have issues here. And I made it very clear I was not a relationship counselor. Or what I
Mhm.
was doing was I was doing Zoom calls, but I would make sure people sent me good facial shots of whoever they were having challenges with. And I would talk about each other's communication patterns. And people were saying, oh, this is what I do and this is what they do. So no wonder we're missing each other. No wonder we have these challenges. So again, just helping people to create those bridges. And then there's so many people, even in senior roles, where they have been promoted beyond their competence in many cases, and certainly beyond their confidence levels. So it's
Mhm.
helping people again to settle into that, to communicate more effectively, but also to, in transcending the lack of confidence, to learn to listen effectively,
Right.
because that's a massive skill that so many people don't have.
Yeah, most people listen to talk, not listen to like to
Mm-hmm.
understand. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of that at one time or another, but I when I see myself doing it, I take a step back, and I'm like, okay, like today I had an instance where somebody outright lied to me about something important that I could have gotten in trouble with for
Mm-hmm.
because I covered for this person, and I instantly, my first reaction was to get angry. Like, but then after I calmed down, I was just like, okay, wait a minute. What did we do to set this manager up to feel that he had to lie about the situation? You know, or how could we have set him up more powerfully? So the old me would have never have thought that. I would have went off the rails. I would have went into my boss's office. I would have like just like whatever. But the new me is like, okay, how could we have changed the situation? I came up with a solution. I went and talked to my boss. I told her my part in it, and whether I was going to get in trouble, I was going to get in trouble, whatever.
Yeah.
I said what I had to say and I left the office. And it's funny, instead of reacting, you know, I think people need to learn to be, just listen and find out, and that's the parts of a good leader, I think, listening skills and just being of service. And I love what you said about um, see their things in their perspective.
Yeah.
And people, because I have such a big heart and because I'm always giving, I figured everybody was out like that. I'm out to tell you folks that is so far from the truth. It's
Mm-hmm.
not even funny, and I would be hurt, and that's part of my childhood traumas because I was so hurt on so many levels on so many different times. And I have to say, during this pandemic, even talking with my husband, because we were had a little bit more time together at the beginning, we both work for essential companies, so it's like we didn't have the luxury that everybody else has had. But I was just like, oh, wait a minute. That's his perspective, not my perspective. I'm like, damn, I'm wrong again.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's and that's that. There's like many of us grew up with the advice, or the advice is not even the best word for it, but the message to treat others as you would like to be treated.
yeah.
But the goal, that was the golden rule, but the platinum rule has superseded that, which is treat others as they would like to be treated. But that means we have to get out of our heads. We have to get out of our heads and realize other people don't see the world that we do. They don't necessarily see this any given situation. Even two people who've lived through exactly the same experience,
Mhm.
side by side, won't see it the same way.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize they have a different perspective. So if we want to build a really strong relationship with them, whether that's in our personal lives or our business lives, we need to take on board where they're at, where they're coming from.
Right. And that is so true. I'm just reading here. You are the author of Face Facts. Tell us more about your book. That sounds exciting.
Yes, yeah, I self-published it back in late 2018, and it's deliberately a short book. It's between 40 50 pages long. An information primer on reading people's faces, and I started off with this idea to write down everything I knew, and it was becoming this monstrosity that had no shape whatever. So I had to just scrap it all and start again. So it's basically taking you through the 8 basic face shapes, going through like 6 variations on forehead shape, eyebrows, eyes, noses, etc., giving a visual for each one and an explanation of what each of those features means in terms of communicating with somebody if you see somebody with that particular feature. So it's a
Right.
simple, practical tool to help people learn to read faces effectively.
I'm gonna have to get that book.
Mhm.
Where can we find it?
You can get it if for those who prefer the ebook, you can get the Kindle version on Amazon. But if you want
Okay.
the hard copy, you can get a signed hard copy from me from my website.
Woohoo. And your website, I'm looking here. I had it at clearsightcommunications.com,
That's it.
right?
Yep.
I'll put it, I have it in the show notes, but I'll put it in the comments as well.
Great.
Um, because I think everybody should get a copy of this book.
Me too. Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if we all were communicating effectively how this world would change?
Yeah, it would make such a different world because we would, if we're particularly if we're communicating effectively and authentically, like there are people who can communicate effectively, as we've seen in the last couple of years with so many people in positions of prominence, and we won't go into any detail, um, who have been very articulate and very good in terms of their presence, but frequently we'll say there's been a lack of authenticity about it. And many people in those positions are very good at using a lot of words and a big presence to say absolutely nothing of significance. So there's a difference between communicating effectively and communicating authentically, which is really what I'm about.
Right. Okay, we have an election here in Canada.
Mhm.
I should send you the shots of the people that are running and get your
Mhm.
feedback for my personal opinion. Because
Mhm.
right now I'm at the point where I don't even know who to trust, quite honestly. I'm just saying that that's just my opinion. That's not the opinion of anybody else's. I'm just like, wow. So I should do that.
Mhm.
uh, and that will steer me on how to vote, people.
Yeah, I have a lot of misgivings about politicians in general. Once they rise through the ranks, I when I was a therapist, I had a number of politicians as my clients, and what they told me in private was often very different to what they were saying in public. So I learned to take a different stance with politicians, and one just in terms of like I work with body language as well. I don't just read faces; I work with body language as well. Um, and one exercise that's worth doing is if you're watching TV or even on online, watching a politician apparently being expressive, emotionally expressive in the delivery, watch it with the sound on, then rewind it and watch it with the sound off, and ask yourself if what you're watching is really aligned with what you just heard, and you'll often find. Mm, mm, mm. No, that doesn't ring true. And that's across the board with many, many politicians of different stripes.
Oh my gosh, we the people so need Joseph to in these times.
Mm,
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I'll get off the topic of politics because it's not one that I usually have on my show.
Mhm.
Um, only because it can get very heated very quickly.
Yeah.
But that is so I'm surprised. Has any of the police departments contacted you for your services?
No, I deliberately won't work with police departments.
Okay.
When I was a therapist, I had quite a number of police officers, lawyers, probation officers, um, uh, prison guards amongst and I even had a few ex-criminals amongst my clientele. And between them all, the stories they told me, I decided, no, I am never going to be working with law enforcement in any shape or form.
That would be interesting because you can tell if they're lying right off the bat.
No, not necessarily. And that's one of the things. It's one of the probably maybe the question I'm asked most. But
Right.
um, it's not necessarily so easy to tell if somebody is lying.
Yeah.
And again, you're not going to just tell it from their facial features, generally speaking, or their
Hmm.
facial expression. You have to pay attention to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and people can use language to confuse and obfuscate and
Right.
create a fog. So you listen to what they say, how they say it, as well as watching. So you have to have all your senses on alert.
On
And
one of them.
a lot of the time, I mean, I don't by and large look for lies or look for deception. I prefer to look for the truth.
Yeah.
But if I get a sense that somebody is lying to me, then I'll pay attention to when that happened. Then
Right.
then what I'll do is I'll let the conversation flow on, and then when the conversation is nice and settled again, I'll return to that aspect of the conversation and see how they respond. And if they say exactly the same thing, which a liar will often do because it's often rehearsed,
Hmm.
that's often a very clear sign. But watch for things like, for example, whether somebody is primarily right-handed or left-handed. So if you get, like, obviously we're online here, so we're not really getting to see the full picture of body language. But for example, if you, like, I have a cup of tea here beside me, and I
Hmm.
will automatically pick it up in my left hand because I'm primarily left-handed. So if you see somebody and you know they're left-hand dominant, and they start being they start being apparently emotionally expressive, but they're using their right hand to gesture a lot.
Hmm.
Just ask yourself, maybe there's something going on here. It's not a clear, definitive indication that they're lying, but
Right.
maybe there's just something going on. And there's the classic example of Bill Clinton when the whole Monica Lewinsky situation blew up. And
Yeah.
there was the famous scenario of him, you know, I did not have sexual relations. And he was waving his right hand up, but he's left-handed. He's
Right.
famously left-handed. So he was making a denial with his right hand. He was looking away from where he was waving his hand, and then the language he used, that woman was distancing himself from the whole proceedings. So that
Right.
combination of things told you, yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Oh man. I'm glad we're friends now, Joseph. Because because truly now I'm gonna go, wait a minute. I've got Joseph in my back pocket now. No, I'm kidding.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, that's awesome that you are able to, I think would you say you're also an empath too?
Yes, but
Yeah.
there are many kinds of empath. I don't get caught up in other people's emotion. Like somebody can tell me a really upsetting story. I won't get caught up in being upset about it. I will feel for them, but I
Right.
won't get caught up in it. But I'll be looking at, okay, how can I support you here? How can I help you here?
Right.
And what's the bigger picture? The fact that you're upset, distressed about something doesn't mean that's necessarily all that's going on. And
Right.
the upset and distress may not be actually serving you. Now, I'm not going to tell somebody to, pull yourself together or something ridiculous like that, but I'd
Right.
be thinking in those terms. How can I best serve you? Not just give you a pat on the back and, you know,
Right.
soothe you.
Right. Wow. Lots of learning. This was like a jam-packed episode, and I can't believe we're at 30 minutes already. So I just want to thank our guests for joining us today, and for those of you that are going to watch this on the replay, because I know this is powerful. It's going to be out there for many years to come. And Joseph, I just want to thank you again for being on the show. Like, this was like the fastest half hour I've ever had, and probably could have went on for another half hour, but I just want to thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your tips, and definitely to get in contact with you, Joseph. What's the best way to do that?
The best way is probably I'm most active on LinkedIn. So particularly if anybody's in the business world, if you have a LinkedIn profile, you get me there under my own name, Joseph McGuire. That's McGuire. Sorry,
Perfect.
there's a lot of background noise here. My apologies. My partner is having a loud conversation in Mandarin. She doesn't realize it's transmitting.
That's totally okay. So connect with Joseph on LinkedIn. Definitely connect with this man. You definitely want to know him. And thank you so much for being on the show today, Joseph.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Dorothea. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you. And you guys be unstoppable, and see you next week.